What if one night it started raining, but instead of water, a strange, jelly-like substance fell from the sky? This is the chilling true story of the Oakville Rain. If you're into real-life mysteries and creepy tales, make sure to subscribe and join us for more unsettling stories every week. The oakvilleblobs mystery. It was early August in 1994 when Kathleen Bellinger and her husband were enjoying a quiet few days away, camping on the Pacific coast, spending their days walking through Washington's Olympic National Park and the stunning views that the beaches provide of the sea. One evening, though, they were relaxing in their tent after a long day of hiking when they heard something. Low rumbles coming from out at sea. Just one or two at first, but then another and another, followed by what sounded like water falling. They walked out of their tent and looked over the now darkened sky over the ocean. There, in the distance, they could just about make out that there was something in the sky. Then the sound of jet engines passed overhead, and the rumbles stopped. The following day, the couple were up early again, out for a morning walk along the coast. After the strange sounds the night before, they had been forced to remain in their tent after a strong rainstorm hit. But then the clouds parted, and the sun was out. They walked down to the beach toward the water when they noticed something odd. There were crabs washed up on the beach, not something that feels that unusual, right? But there were hundreds of them, and none of them were moving. There you go. But it was something else around the crabs, washing up alongside them with each lap of the waves. Tiny little blocks of a gel-like substance, only about the size of half a grain of rice, but noticeable due to the sheer number of them covering the beach, stuck to the bodies of the dead crabs. The Bellingers didn't realize it at the time, but they had just become one of the first witnesses to a mystery that people would still be struggling to explain 30 years later. Welcome to the Unheard Library. I'm really excited to delve into this one tonight. It's something a little different, but I'm sure you all, just like me, enjoy getting into a good unsolved mystery, and this one has it all. I'm not sure if any of you can hear this, but at the time of recording, there's currently a big rainstorm happening outside my window, and it just feels like the perfect setting for this story. For now, grab yourself a hot drink, unless it's boiling hot where you are. Then I recommend a stiff drink, dim the lights, and get comfortable. It's time to talk about the strange incident of the Oakvilleblobs. Oakville is a small town just 40 miles from the coast in Washington State in the United States of America. Running along Route 12 and surrounded on all sides by deep forest, it is quite a secluded area of the country. The population back in 1994 was less than 600 residents. If something strange were to happen in this place, word would spread quickly. If there is one thing Washington is known for, even on my side of the Atlantic, it's rain. The area has, on average, just under 150 days of rain every single year. So when a storm rolled into town in the early hours of August 7th, 1994, no one would have thought anything of it. It was around 3:00 a.m. when the clouds opened up and started hammering down on Oakville. Police officer David Lacey was out on patrol at that time, driving down the highway with a civilian friend of his who was along for the ride. It had been a quiet night, as so many nights in Oakville were. The rain hit, and he noticed that his wipers were having a hard time clearing his view. His entire windscreen was quickly covered in the moisture, and he was struggling to see where he was going. Weirder still, it wasn't just that the wipers couldn't keep up with the level of rain, but it seemed to be smearing a strange paste-like substance across his window. Realizing quickly that he would need to pull over, he was relieved to see the lights of a petrol station and quickly pulled in. Driving under cover from the powerful rainfall, he stepped out of the car and instantly stopped in his tracks. There was something on his windshield, and it wasn't rain. Lacey grabbed a latex glove from his car and ran his hand across the strange goo that covered his windshield. He described the feel of the substance as jello-like and mushy. He glanced out into the night from the cover of the station, and he could see it all over the floor of the street. Whatever this was coming down with the rain. It was in the early hours of the morning that congressional spokesman 𝗧𝗵𝗵𝗺 got a phone call from an Oakville resident who claimed that blobs were raining from the sky. Being it was 4 in the morning, he simply dismissed it as a hoax. But then another phone call followed, and then another. Residents were concerned that something strange was falling from the sky. At the same time, 𝗧𝗵𝗵𝗺 had been asleep when she was awoken by the sound of rain hitting her window. She had moved to Oakville just a few years prior to spend more time with her mother Dodie, who owned a farm in the area. Sunny lay there in bed, looking up at her windows as the rain hit, when something unusual struck her. The rain looked thick. The following morning, the rainstorm had passed over, and Dodie got up early to take her dogs out into the garden. Sunny was inside enjoying her morning coffee when her mother returned, looking a little confused. Sunny asked her mother what was wrong, and she explained that everything outside looked like it was covered in hailstones. But when she had touched it, she claimed that the hail was soft and gooey. Stranger still, the hail didn't melt in her hand. Sunny stepped outside to take a look herself, and sure enough, her mother was right. Everything was covered in a thin layer of translucent blobs, each about the size of half a grain of rice. Sunny was intrigued. What was this substance? She called her brother, a paramedic who also lived in the area. He brought with him a few pairs of gloves, and the pair began picking up small samples of the blobs. Sunny decided to run a few experiments herself on the blobs. First, she placed it in water and discovered that it would float on top. She then put it in a V with alcohol to see if it would break down, but it didn't. She even checked to see if it was flammable, but it wouldn't ignite. She wasn't the only resident who had taken an interest in the blobs. One local reported going to pick up the blobs to see if she could figure out what they were when she noticed. Laying next to a pile of them was a frog and a raven, both of which were dead. The next day, Sunny started making phone calls, concerned that whatever this substance was had seemingly rained down on not just her mother's farm, but others as well, potentially covering many crops. She initially contacted a Department of Agriculture, but they, along with many of the other organizations she called, didn't seem to be super concerned by the strange incident. 𝗧𝗵𝗵𝗺 was continuing to get calls himself from concerned citizens. While he vowed to get to the bottom of what had happened, the fact that no one seemingly had been harmed by the goo made it not really feel like a big priority. However, as these phone calls were being made, Officer David Lacey, the policeman who had been caught out driving when the blobs had fallen, was currently staggering into the local hospital, sweating, disorientated, and pale. He was immediately admitted to the hospital, and he wouldn't be the only one. Later on, August 8th, Sunny returned to her mother's farm. Upon entering the farmhouse, she immediately sensed something was wrong. Her mother wasn't there. After searching the house, she eventually found Dottie collapsed on the bathroom floor. She had been vomiting, looked pale, was drenched in sweat, and was barely conscious. Sunny immediately called 911, but just before they left for the hospital, she made a crucial connection. She and her brother had been very careful handling the mysterious blobs, always using gloves. Their mother, on the other hand, had touched them directly with her bare hands. Thinking quickly, Sunny grabbed one of the samples and brought it with her to the hospital. Dr. David Little was on duty that day. He could tell right away that Dottie was suffering from some type of viral illness. When Sunny explained the situation, Dr. Little agreed to examine the sample she brought. He handed it off to a lab technician who, after viewing it under a microscope, was stunned to discover what looked like white blood cells inside the goo. However, they didn't have the necessary resources to determine what kind of creature the cells might have come from. With her mother in the hospital, Sunny returned to the farm. Only a few remnants of the strange goo remained on the property. As she approached the front door, she caught sight of something dark out of the corner of her eye. There, lying lifeless on the decking, was the family's recently adopted kitten. It wouldn't be the only loss. In the weeks that followed, a number of local pets and livestock fell ill, and many of them died. Some animals were reportedly found with a strange green film coating their mouths. 𝗧𝗵𝗵𝗺 and Officer Lacey weren't the only humans affected either. A wave of flu-like symptoms swept through Oakville, sending a significant number of residents to the hospital with nearly identical conditions. Sunny became more convinced than ever that the blobs were behind the illness. She sent additional samples to various organizations and began speaking with the press. Later that week, a reporter visited Sunny at the farm. While they were there, a sudden rainstorm hit. The reporter looked out the window and commented on how the rain looked thick. It sent a chill down Sunny's spine. This wasn't a one-time incident. Over the next 3 weeks, at least 6 separate events occurred in which the blobs rained down across a 20-square-mile radius. Each time, reports of sick and dying animals followed closely behind, along with more and more people showing symptoms of what was thought to be a mysterious flu. But this wasn't your standard flu. Residents were sick, not for days or a week, but for weeks or even months. After 4 days, 𝗧𝗵𝗵𝗺 and Officer Lacey were released from the hospital. They'd both apparently contracted an unidentifiable virus, but doctors were confident that medication and rest would be enough. Interestingly, 𝗧𝗵𝗵𝗺's symptoms were largely attributed to a severe inner ear infection, a diagnosis many other patients received during the same period. Meanwhile, the test results from the various labs began coming back, and they were confusing. The Department of Ecology believed the substance was some sort of biological waste, but couldn't determine its exact nature. The Washington State Health Department reported that the cells within the blobs lacked nuclei, meaning they were unlikely to be white blood cells as first suspected. However, they did find 2 types of bacteria in the goo, both typically found in the digestive tracts of humans and most mammals. One source even noted that the same bacteria are used in agriculture to treat plant diseases, suggesting the blobs may have contained bioengineered agents. A microbiologist named Mike McDowell, who worked at the health department and had close ties to the military, became deeply involved in the investigation. He was among the experts called upon during the post-9/11 anthrax scare, and according to Sunny, he conducted the most extensive research on the blobs. Though McDowell is no longer alive, his leading theory was that the blobs were a type of delivery system for the bacteria, designed to fall from a high altitude and safely reach the ground. He stored the samples in a medium containment facility, worried they might contain hazardous biological agents. Sunny sent one final sample, which she had stored in her freezer for over a year, to an independent lab. But even they couldn't reach a definitive conclusion about the substance's origin. McDowell's theory suggested that the blobs were man-made, intentionally deployed over Oakville for a specific purpose. Despite the seriousness of this hypothesis, a different, less sinister theory began circulating widely in the media. It proposed that what fell on Oakville was the remains of jellyfish. According to this version, the rumbling sounds Kathleen had heard were likely the result of military bombing exercises over the ocean, something known to occur in the region. The theory posited that an explosion had obliterated a school of jellyfish, sending their remains high into the atmosphere, only for them to fall later with the rain. While plausible, after all, documented cases exist of animals and debris falling from the sky due to weather phenomena. The repetition of the event 6 times across several weeks made this explanation hard to accept. More importantly, none of the labs that examined the blobs ever identified them as jellyfish remains. Compounding suspicions were reports of increased military aircraft activity over Oakville in the days and weeks leading up to the first blob sighting. 𝗧𝗵𝗵𝗺 even filmed the aircraft, pointing out how they resembled the infamous black helicopters, often associated with conspiracy theories. In 1997, Unsolved Mysteries aired a segment on the Oakville incident, though no new information came to light. Around that time, Sunny, now working in a local diner, had an unsettling encounter. 3 men she didn't recognize walked in and began questioning her. One of them bluntly asked, "Is this the town where the blobs fell?" He then asked her directly about military aircraft sightings during that period. The encounter was so unnerving that Sonny tried to note their license plate as they left. Another customer, who had also been eavesdropping, told her they'd already written it down. The vehicle was later traced to Fort Hood, a U.S. military base in Texas. Between the sudden appearance of military-style men, increased aircraft sightings, and McDowell's theory about the blobs being a bacterial delivery mechanism, Sonny came to believe, as have many others in recent years, that the Oakville incident may have been a military experiment. Perhaps it was a test of a biological delivery system, or even a covert trial to observe how the bacteria affected a live population. The U.S. Air Force has denied involvement, but history contains unsettling precedents, like Operation Sea Spray in the 1950s, during which the U.S. military released what they believed to be harmless bacteria over San Francisco to study how it spread. Many residents became ill, and at least one person died, though the government never officially linked the test to the illnesses. And yet, such operations were not supposed to occur after 1969, when President Richard Nixon officially banned the use of biological and chemical weapons. If the Oakville incident was a test, it would have been a violation of that directive. It would be a violation of international treaties if this was the case. Why would the military make such a visibly obvious delivery device, such as a goo falling from the air? Although others have pointed out that there have been similar reports of blobs falling from the sky in other places throughout the country and the world, because these didn't lead to people falling ill. They were mostly forgotten about or not widely documented and studied as much as the Oakville incident. In other instances where similar blobs have been found on the ground, a natural explanation has been discovered, such as the case in Somerset in 2013, where overnight a bird sanctuary was suddenly discovered to be covered in a similarly large amount of blobs. However, this turned out to apparently just be large quantities of frog spawn. To add to the whole conspiracy angle, Mike McDowell was never able to finish his research on the blobs after his samples went missing. He told Sonny, and later in life, his children, that he went to work one day and discovered that his sample was gone. Mike was panicking. He had worked in this lab for decades and had never misplaced a sample before, especially one that he considered could potentially be so dangerous. He immediately went to his supervisor, who simply told Mike to forget about it and to not ask any more questions. The samples were gone, but McDowell did at least ask some more questions of the other staff members in the lab. The receptionist apparently revealed to him that some men in black suits had come to the lab earlier that day and taken the samples with them. She had not been informed who they were or what organization they were from, but Mike's supervisor had handed over the samples, apparently with little to no resistance. Many theories about what the rain could have been discussed over the years. Everything from star jelly to airplane toilet waste to vast amounts of frog spawn. But in most cases, these theories have either been debunked or just don't explain everything that happened. In the case of the airplane toilet waste, it was actually officially investigated as a potential cause, as it would have explained the appearance of biological material in the samples. But a key part of why this was dismissed is that waste from planes comes out blue, not translucent like the blobs had been. The samples that Sonny collected were all sent out to various labs and organizations. They have all been used up in testing, and in some incidents have apparently gone missing, meaning there are no remaining samples of the Oakville blobs that are known to still exist. The Washington State Department of Health doesn't even have any records of ever having received a sample, despite Sonny keeping detailed records of all the organizations she dealt with during this time. The vast majority of the people who worked on the samples are no longer alive, meaning much of the story of the Oakville incident now only exists as a combination of oral history and a handful of newspaper clippings. But Sonny continues to this day to try and get answers about what happened to her community back in 1994. Whether she will ever receive any answers remains as much of a mystery as the Oakville Rain itself. That's all for this entry into the Unheard Library. As always, I would love to hear your theories on this case. Do you have a theory of your own of what the oakvilleblobs were? Or is there some information that I may have missed here that could potentially explain it? If you're watching this on YouTube, then please do drop me a comment below. Or if you're listening to the podcast, you can find my email address in the description if you'd like to get in touch with your theories. I really enjoyed putting this episode together. It was something a little different after a few episodes of haunted houses and forests, so I hope you guys had fun with it. If you did, and you haven't already, then please consider subscribing. You can also click the like button. I know everyone on YouTube goes on about that, but it really is a super simple way to support creators you enjoy. I'll be back next week with some more true paranormal tales on my second show, Night Drive Paranormal, and then we'll be back here in 2 weeks with another entry into the Unheard Library.